Hello, welcome to my political news opinion review of major news from December of 2019. The final days of the decade in many ways taking their time. In other ways, trivializing the concept of time. I will be giving my opinions on the following stories. Kamala Harris dropping out of the 2020 presidential race, President Donald Trump's impeachment and related stories, West Virginia Governor Jim Justice approving the firing of candidates who Nazi saluted in a picture, the breach of a U.S. embassy by Iraqi protesters, 5 stabbed in a rabbi's home during Hanukkah, a parishioner saving his fellow parishioners by killing a shooter, Inspector General Michael Horowitz's congressional testimony, the Navy SEAL's opinions of pardoned war criminal Eddie Gallagher, the 6th Democratic presidential debate, the results of the UK election, and the lies of the Afghanistan war. Senator Kamala Harris dropped out of the 2020 presidential race. She said that it was due to not having enough donations coming into her campaign to justify her continuing in the race. I believe that Senator Harris is speaking a half-truth in that explanation. But I do genuinely believe she added a lot to this race. Unfortunately, she was one of many in the race who slightly moderated their positions, and she wasn't careful in her criticisms. She criticized Joe Biden for his stance on busing. Then later, she said it wasn't a big issue to a supporter. She criticized Tulsi Gabbard for going on Fox News. Then, within a week, appeared on Fox News herself. However, while that caused her to drop in the polls, it wasn't the reason I believe she dropped out. I see 2 possibilities. 1, due to her drop in the polls and seeming inability to regain her momentum, powerful Democratic establishment peoples told her that they would prefer to back someone else as they no longer saw her having a chance at winning, much like Scott Walker's dropout in the 2016 Republican primary. Number 2, one of the top 3 may have offered her the VP position or a cabinet position. There is a chance that any of the 3 offered this, but I believe that Biden and Warren are far more likely to strike such a deal. If this is the case, I believe it would be better if she had stayed in the race from a strategic standpoint. The House of Representatives voted to impeach Donald Trump on 2 articles, being obstruction of Congress and abuse of power. Every Republican voted against impeachment. A few Democrats voted against as well, though for various reasons. And Representative Tulsi Gabbard voted present on both articles. While it is somehow still controversial, looking into the transcripts of the calls, hearings, and the evidence, I believe that Congress had enough to impeach the president. The narrative during and now after impeachment by Republicans is that it wasn't a fair process and that Democrats didn't have enough witnesses. The witnesses that Republicans say weren't invited actually were, but the president blocked them from testifying. It doesn't make sense for Republicans to use this argument, as they are saying things aren't fair, but when the Democrats offered fairness, they refused it. Speaker Nancy Pelosi is at this moment refusing to send the articles of impeachment to the Senate until the very witnesses that were invited to the House but the president stopped, and the Republicans say are necessary, are allowed to testify during the trial. The Democrats are refusing to send it until they make it fair by the Republican standard. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has also stated he wouldn't be impartial in the Senate trial, something that would be in direct violation of an oath he would be required to take right before being a juror at the president's trial. Bernie Sanders, in contrast, said that while he believes the president likely abused his power, that he would look at the evidence and that he would try his best to be an impartial juror. Whether you believe the president is guilty or innocent, you should want a fair trial. And I believe that witnesses should be called to the trial. Impeachment is not a trial. It is an investigation and indictment. The defense has had the opportunity to call witnesses to the investigation and didn't do so. I hope that they will then call witnesses to the trial to defend themselves. You can't be upset about being treated unfairly if it's your decision not to make it fair for yourself. Jim Justice approved the firing of various cadets, guards, and academy staff who participated in a photo in which they were giving Nazi-style salutes. Various news agencies reported that the people would occasionally perform the salute since boot camp, and that it was not intended to be racist or anti-Semitic. When it comes to racism or anti-Semitism, intent is a terrible excuse. The only time this is an acceptable excuse is when the origin of the racist/anti-Semitic thing is unknown to the person, or when a child who was taught the incorrect thing and hasn't yet been corrected. The United States actually previously used the salute during the Pledge of Allegiance before the Nazis used it. So America changed the salute to a hand over the heart. It is an anti-Semitic and racist gesture still used by neo-Nazis who would be emboldened to see people in these positions performing the salute regardless of the intentions of those pictured. I wish these people mature and learn from this experience, as well as hope they can find future work. This is why it is always repeated that what you post online is there forever. You can have an inside joke or be super sarcastic, but online, people don't know that, and so there is the potential for victims in this case. Protesters angered by American military strikes that killed various Iraqi military leaders became violent and stormed the American embassy in Iraq. Iraqi officials say the ambassador and other staff were evacuated, while the U.S. government hasn't verified that and blames the Iraqi government for the violence. This is why strategic planning for foreign relations is so important, as many times the consequences of getting rid of evil/violence is more violence. I hope that the American foreign policy will change to be a better force for peace. Specifically, trained and mandated to avoid bloodshed, violence, and destruction, with a boost given to our State Department to ensure that negotiation and talking is truly as effective as it possibly can be. December is a time of celebration for many, gift giving and spending time with family and friends. Unfortunately, on the 7th day of Hanukkah, at a rabbi's New York home, a man entered and stabbed 5 people. Governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, called the attack an instance of domestic terrorism and pointed out that it is part of a growing string of anti-Semitic and other hate crimes. The president also commenting on the horrificness of the attack. It is unacceptable that in the United States, more and more domestic terrorists feel emboldened to carry out these types of attacks. While I do offer my thoughts and prayers, I also understand we must also offer methods to reduce the amount of these attacks. It isn't a simple thing to solve, but it is important that leaders show that religious and racial tolerance is the only acceptable position. Many, though not all, of these attackers will only feel comfortable doing the attack if they can twist something into perceived support from a powerful person. I also believe that a massive increase in mental health care funding could help with these attacks, as mental health care can identify mental illness, or in cases where it isn't illness, be able to uncover the plans if premeditated at all. These would also likely help with understanding in many ways, as biases of any kind or any intensity could be identified and dealt with properly. A shooter in Texas entered a church on Sunday morning, killing 2 people before armed parishioners who are part of a church security team killed the shooter. It is lucky for the people of the church that they had people in place to protect from such an attack, but it is so upsetting that such a thing would occur. Again, I say we must take steps to confront domestic terrorism such as this, as Americans always seem too afraid to acknowledge all of these attacks as forms of terrorism. We must ensure that diversity is accepted and peace is a strong virtue, while properly funding mental health care as mentioned above. Horowitz, who was tasked with investigating a probe into the 2016 Trump presidential campaign, gave his report through congressional testimony. He found that the probe was flawed, but not politically motivated. It is important that everyone hears both of those parts of the report, as it would mean that the main concern of the president was wrong of him to assume, and that it was still minimally flawed in some way. I believe that this should ease any concerns people had about the probe into the campaign, as the flaws that I've seen reported are minimal in nature and likely insignificant. This testimony is important as it is another showing of the president's paranoia and conspiracy theories. Not to mention that the FBI and other agencies were investigating both of the major candidates for president in 2016, which is a dead giveaway that it wasn't politically motivated. President Trump pardoned a former Navy SEAL known as Eddie Gallagher, who was accused of killing an innocent non-combatant and taking a picture with the body. It is a war crime to kill a non-combatant under international law. A short time after this pardon, interviews with former colleagues of Mr. Gallagher were released. Breaking an unwritten code of silence, the SEALs described Gallagher as violent, quote, evil, and, quote, toxic, end quote. One said, "You could tell he was perfectly okay with killing anybody that was moving." This is important, as President Trump has portrayed Gallagher as a hero, despite the fact that all signs point to him being the opposite. Gallagher will luckily be punished in hell for his heinous acts, but due to corruption and the president, he will now get to live the rest of his earthly life a free man. I hope that our government will not allow Mr. Gallagher to stain our reputation ever again. The sixth presidential debate happened in December between Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Bernie Sanders, Tom Steyer, Elizabeth Warren, and Andrew Yang. Pointed out by many that Andrew Yang was the only non-white individual on stage. However, that does undersell the diversity of the stage. Bernie Sanders would be the first Jewish president. Klobuchar or Warren would be the first woman president. Buttigieg would be the first openly gay president. And Yang, as stated above, would be the first Asian American president. This debate nearly didn't happen after a labor dispute by the workers of the stadium/venue, with all candidates refusing to cross the picket line for the event. Luckily, an agreement was reached in time for the debate. Joe Biden managed to seem slightly more put together, and had a bit of a win by not having to be on camera constantly. Biden had previously made comments about probably only being a one-term president, but sidestepped the question during the debate. I believe that it is an acknowledgement that he isn't as much of a surefire candidate as previously believed. The most memorable moment was when Elizabeth Warren brought up Buttigieg's fundraiser in a billionaire's wine cave and the opinion of the others on that topic. It is a terrific example of the main division in Democratic politics: money in politics. Progressives, like myself, believe that if someone who is as out of touch as a billionaire gives you money, then you are likely out of touch or corrupted by the money. While those who do accept billionaire dollars believe that it is a simple contribution to help them help the little guys. Or hopefully not, a more corrupted idea of them lying in order to help the billionaires' wealth grow. Climate change was brought into the conversation earlier than it was in other debates, luckily, as well as China trade relations, Muslim Uyghurs, I don't fully know how to pronounce that, and Israel-Palestine being brought into the conversation. It is great that they showed they are ready to take on the various duties of the presidency and concerned about all issues. Debates need to span vast issues and policies due to the incredible number of decisions the president makes. I enjoyed the sixth debate the most out of any so far. The United Kingdom held an election again, as the Prime Minister wanted a mandate for Brexit. The two main candidates were Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn. Boris Johnson is a strongly pro-Brexit Conservative Party member who was Prime Minister before the election. And Jeremy Corbyn is a Democratic Socialist member of the Labour Party. I personally endorsed Labour wins with a strong Scottish National Party presence from Scotland. Unfortunately, Johnson's Conservative Party won the most seats in Parliament and thus continued his prime ministership. I do not believe that this was a fair fight, however. You see, the Labour Party was defeated largely due to false advertisements by the Conservative Party. Some fact-checkers finding that a large majority of Conservative advertisements contained lies. In addition to this, the anti-Semitic controversies present in both major political parties were largely only covered when it was a Labour Party member, when in reality both parties had candidates removed due to anti-Semitism, with both parties dealing with the issue. I hope to see a major Labour win in the future and prosperity in the UK. But with Brexit incoming still, it is vastly difficult to determine the future of the country. Good luck, UK. Documents recently obtained after a court battle shows that for the past 2 decades, the United States government misled the public on the war in Afghanistan. We have heard from various officials of false successes and false improvements in the war. Even after it was determined that the war was unwinnable, they remained and told no one. This is unacceptable. I understand that 9/11 was a terrible day in our history, but I am tired of hearing about our government doing illegal activities. They illegally spy on us using the NSA. They illegally torture unconvicted peoples in Guantanamo Bay, and so much more. President Bush and the federal government killed the spirit of America in response to this attack, which is not okay. We must restore America to be a free place in which we hold our government accountable. I understand keeping war information classified, but it isn't okay to mislead us, as this would lead to more and more and more death. from the war that you have already determined to be unwinnable. That is why it is unacceptable. To conclude, please like this video, share it with friends and family, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, making sure to hit the bell icon. Please also check out my Instagram at Lopez4OKill, Twitter at Lopez4OKill, and Facebook, facebook.com/colby.lopez.12, which all should be linked in the description. I'm Colby Lopez, and I approve this message.